Episode 266 Autism Changes Siblings Too. The untold story nobody talks about. Well, hey, friend, welcome to another episode of the Not Your Average Autism Mom podcast. I am your host, Shannon Urquiola, and I'm so glad that you're here today. I have been raising my amazing son, Jordan, for almost 30 years, and I've spent the last several years coaching and mentoring moms just like you because I just think that you shouldn't have to figure out all of this on your own. And before we jump in, I want to let you know that this week's episode of the podcast is sponsored by NeuroFree. I will tell you a little more about them later in the episode. But today we're going to talk about something that comes up in this community all the time, but not always out loud. This week was Sibling Day, and it made me think about something that doesn't get talked about enough in the autism parenting world, and that is the siblings, the brothers and sisters growing up alongside autism. Because while the focus is often, understandably with our children with autism, there is another story unfolding in the same house. And sometimes those siblings feel the weight of that, not because they don't love their brother or sister, but because their childhood looks different than they expected to. And it looks different than their friends' experiences do. And if you're a mom raising multiple children in this dynamic, chances are you have likely felt that weight as well. Let's start with something almost every mom feels. Every mom I've coached has said at some point, I feel like I'm not giving my other kids enough. And that guilt sits really heavy because the reality is when one child has higher needs, medically, emotionally, behaviorally, educationally, a lot of your time naturally gets pulled in that direction. You have appointments and IEP meetings and therapies, and you're managing meltdowns and there's sleep struggles, and you're advocating at school and you're managing safety. It's not that you want to divide your attention unevenly. It's that sometimes you have to. And your other children, they see it. They understand more than you think. But that doesn't mean that they don't feel it. I remember moments when Maddie was younger where I would think, am I giving her the childhood that she deserves? Because so many things in our family revolved around Jordan's needs: where we went, what we did, how long we stayed, even the noise level in our own house. And I know many of you listening have had those exact same thoughts. But here's something important to remember. Kids don't measure love by equal time. They measure it by quality time. And sometimes those small moments matter more than any big one ever could. Sometimes the conversations that we have inside of this community open a lot of deeper questions for parents, especially when it comes to understanding what might help our children long term. And before we keep going, I want to take a quick moment to thank the sponsor of today's episode. This episode is sponsored by NeuroFree, a US-based provider offering patented cell infusion therapy for children and young adults with autism. Their process begins with a consultation and medical review guided by a board-certified physician to determine whether a child may be a candidate. Their work focuses on supporting neurological wellness and reducing inflammation in nerve pathways. Every child's autism journey is different and outcomes can vary. To learn more about NeuroFree and to schedule a consultation, visit neuro-free.com or call 504-294-8333. And I'll put all of their details into the show notes. And now let's get back to this conversation. Siblings grow up faster. That's just another reality that doesn't get talked about enough. Siblings of autistic children often grow up faster than if they didn't have an autistic sibling, but in a way that gives them a perspective that most kids their age don't have. I believe that they learn patience earlier, they learn empathy earlier, they learn that life doesn't always follow the same path for everyone. And sometimes they become incredibly protective of their sibling. I've seen this so many times inside of our community over and over again. And I've seen it in Maddie. When she was little, there were things that she didn't fully understand. But as she got older, she began to get Jordan in a way that few people ever do. She knows how he processes things. She knows what helps him when he's overwhelmed. She also knows how to push his buttons when she wants to, but she knows how to meet him where he is. And that didn't happen overnight. It happened through years of growing up alongside of him. You know, sometimes there is resentment. And I say that not to make any of you uncomfortable, but I think it's important. Not every sibling feels only compassion and patience. Sometimes there's resentment, and that's human. Sometimes siblings feel frustrated that family plans change. Sometimes they feel embarrassed in social settings. Sometimes they wish things were easier. Sometimes they wish their brother or sister could do the things that their friends' siblings can do. And those feelings don't make them bad siblings, it makes them honest humans. One of the biggest gifts we can give our children is permission to talk about those feelings without shame. Because when kids feel like they have to hide those feelings, that's when the distance can grow. But when they feel safe expressing them, that's when understanding grows. You know, Maddie and Jordan, what I learned watching them was I had several people, you know, ask me when Maddie was younger what their relationship was like and what I thought it would look like as adults. I honestly never knew what to say because autism can make sibling relationships complicated. Sometimes they're close, sometimes they're distant, sometimes they go through seasons of both. But Maddie and Jordan's relationship has grown as they've been into adulthood. And as a mom watching that, it's meant more to me than I could ever explain because Jordan and Maddie were not close when they were younger. And when you're raising kids in this dynamic, you sometimes wonder what their relationship will look like later in life. You know, you don't have to force the relationship, you just have to give it room to grow. And, you know, while there are challenges, there are also things that siblings gain that I think are incredibly powerful. They learn acceptance. They learn that people communicate differently. They learn that intelligence and value don't always look the way the world expects. They often become incredibly compassionate adults. I've seen siblings go into careers in healthcare and education and therapy and advocacy, not because they had to, but because growing up alongside autism shaped how they see the world. And sometimes those siblings become the most important people in their brother or sister's lives. If you're raising siblings in your home, these are just a few things that really matter. First, make space for individual time when you can, even if it's small, a walk, a car ride, a trip to the library, a conversation at bedtime. Those little moments go a long way. Second, let siblings express their feelings honestly without immediately trying to fix them. Sometimes they just need to be heard. And third, don't assume the relationship has to look a certain way. Every sibling relationship is different. Some are deeply connected, some are more independent. Both of them can still be loving. And if you're listening to this today and you've been carrying guilt about how autism has impacted your other children, I want you to know this. You didn't choose this parenting path, but you are doing the best you can with what you know right now, and that is enough. And the truth is that your children are learning more from watching your love and your patience and your resilience and your perseverance than you probably realize. They're learning how to care for people who experience the world differently. They're learning compassion and resilience. And those are lessons that will shape them for the rest of their lives. Sibling relationships in families impacted by autism aren't always simple, but they can be incredibly meaningful. And sometimes the best moments happen years later when you least expect them. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. And before we wrap up, I want to again thank NeuroFree for sponsoring this week's episode and helping support conversations like this for families navigating autism. If you're needing more than a weekly podcast, if you're struggling and maybe you're feeling alone and you want resources that actually make a difference, be sure to check out our website at notyouraverage.autismmom.com and check out the other resources we have available to help you on this parenting path that none of us planned. They're all designed for moms just like you. And don't forget, if you loved this episode or if it helped you, feel a little less alone, share it with another autism mom who maybe could use some encouragement today. Leave a review, tag us on social media, and help us keep getting these messages out and normalizing this parenting journey that none of us planned. Until next week, above all, remember, you, mama, are doing amazing at this mom thing.